was part physics, part metaphysics, part politics, and part religion, and it was starting to work. He traveled around the Northeast spreading his gospel, and after running a mop business into the ground, he moved to New York City to start a small commune of Koreshans. It's worth noting that part of that move seems to have been running away from a lawsuit claiming he defrauded a woman out of her fortune. So there's that. And his wife had gotten sick and died while he was on the Koreshanbi circuit. So he just moved past all that. At least in the New York City of the late 1800s, he could operate on the fringes of religion, science, and medicine without really getting kicked out of any of it. And in 1886, an invitation to speak at a National Association of Mental Science conference in Chicago turned into Teed and the Koreshans moving. That's where he founded a metaphysical institution called World College of Life, a monthly newsletter called The Guiding Light. By 1888, Teed and his 126 followers were living on the picturesque Chicago. Most of the residents were women, and all of them believed they were living deep inside the gold rind of the earth. But the more followers Koreshanbi attracted, the more conflicts they had with the city of Chicago and their neighbors. And Teed had a lot of problems with his followers' husbands. A lot. So what did he do? He became one of the first true Florida men. Teed promised the Koreshans that their new community on the southwest coast of Florida would be a new Jerusalem that would soon be the home of 8 million people walking on perfectly planned streets paved with gold. Teed wrote, "There will be no smudge or smoke. The power by which machinery will be moved will be by the utilization of the electromagnetic currents of the earth and air, independently of steam application to so-called dynamos. Motors will take the place of motion derived from steam pressure. The city will be constructed on the most magnificent scale, without the use of so-called money. These things can be done easily." Initially, they got thatched roof shacks and ate a lot of loggerhead turtles, but the 200 Koreshans eventually constructed a bakery, a sawmill, lecture halls, schools, and an outdoor theater. They built and grew a broad range of sustainable businesses and enterprises. The Koreshan community was actually working, or at least not failing miserably. He crafted the religion and the community, but he still had to prove that we were all living inside a shell. Openness of the land and the water into the Gulf of Mexico was a perfect testing ground for Teed's concave Earth theory, so he built a device that could prove to the world they were living inside a cosmogenic egg. We don't really hear about cosmogony all that much. In the scientific sense, it goes beyond cosmology's study of the observable universe to speculate on its deepest origins. It's a broader approach that could include creation myths like the world end models that still exist everywhere from Finland to Polynesia. Deciding where cosmology stops and cosmogony begins can get really murky. So it was perfect for Teed, who still insisted his ideas were rooted in hard science. In Hollow Earth, David Standish describes what he was trying to prove. The idea was simple. Earth's curvature were convex, a straight line extending for any distance would touch at only one point. But if it were concave, a line long enough, it would eventually bump into the upper surface. He worked with Ulysses Grant Morrow, a flat earther who Teed had converted into a concave earth, to detail his theories in the cellular cosmogony, including the results of their scientific experiments using a device Morrow built called the rectilineator, which sounds like something you shouldn't Google. Should. The task was to prove that everything we think we know largely comes from optical illusions by projecting a straight line far enough to generate conclusive measurements of gravity. The cellular cosmography describes the rectilinear as a number of sections in the form of double T squares, each 12 feet in length, with raised and tensioned cross arms 4 feet in length. The length of the cross arms is to the length of the section as 1 is to 3. The material of which the sections of the rectilinear are constructed is inch mahogany, seasoned for 12 years in the shops of the Pullman Palace Car Company, Pullman, Illinois. The Koreans built a rectilinear on the beach, taking sections that looked like pieces of a fence and joining them with screws and brass fittings, making sure that they were perfectly level and using fine gauges to ensure the tolerance was within 1/1000th of an inch. They took exhaustive measurements and changes of the projected line, which were then officially signed by Mrs. Bertholdine Boomer, and then detached the backmost part of the rectilinear to extend the front part until they then hit a predetermined point, and they did the whole thing backwards to the starting point to verify that the alignment had been correct. They measured for 2.5 miles on land before they ran into water. They did about 2 more miles measuring with boats, and they got all the data they needed to prove that the Earth's surface was indeed concave. Morrow was so confident in the brilliance of the Koreshan experiment that even before they started, they planned to submit an application for a Nobel Prize. Cyrus T. Ulysses Grant Morrow did not win a Nobel Prize. The rectilinear was flawed. Believe it or not, the data was bad, and although mahogany is one of the more stable woods, any furniture maker at the time of Teague could have told him it would swell and contract from spending months in the most volatile humidity the United States had to offer. The measurements were garbage, but they put it all in the cellular cosmogony, and Morrow told a reporter that nothing can now impede the progress of the Koreshan system. It is invincible. Despite being invincible, no one took them seriously. Teed said the startling information flashed from city to city, continent to continent, reverberating around the world. But a quick search of archives like newspapers.com shows that's not true. Startling information only seemed to flash around inside the Koreshans' concave enclave. The whole tea thing started to fall apart. Toward the end, it was lawsuits, infighting, and perpetual battle with nearby residents and local politicians, all culminating in a horrible street brawl involving Koreshans in Fort Myers. When T tried to break it up, the town marshal beat him severely. No one was worried because T was immortal, but he was unable to fully recover from the beating and died years later, never resurrected. The Koreshan kept going. After Teed's death, and prominent people like Thomas Edison and Henry Ford visited, but the community was leaderless and rudderless, and slowly began to disperse and die out. His last member was a German woman named Hedwig Mitchell, who arrived in 1940 to escape Nazi persecution. She died in 1940.
Everybody stand back!
The land and its remaining
no
lands
escape.
now comprise
Drop your weapons. You
Koreshan
asked
State Park. Hollow Earthers still exist. Mustafa Abdul-Qadir of Egypt published papers advocating extraterrestrial activities. And there's still a shocking amount of mystery regarding what's inside. The deepest we've dug is the Kola Super Deep borehole, which goes less than 8 miles down. That only leaves another 3,951 miles for epic tales of science fiction. We know that Teed and the Hollow Earthers are wrong. We know the Earth is a sphere and that we exist on its convex surface, and now have pictures from space to prove it. We know why ships disappear over the horizon, and we know why train tracks appear to get increasingly close together the further away they run. But in a way, Cyrus T may have been more right than he even knew. Ever-expanding, limitless nothingness is unsettling. Chaos on an incredible scale, all beyond our control or even beyond our ability to understand, is ominous. It becomes increasingly impossible to know where you are, to know who you are. We all start inside the
Ooh,
world. It's our
find any
smallest
firework materials
hollow
in there?
Earth. Then our world gets bigger, slowly, as we experience more of it and its people. We push those boundaries, we push against that golden line so that we're just comfortably uncomfortable as it expands, because anything beyond that pace can be too much to bear. We like the Italian restaurant in town, and the neighbor's overly friendly cat, and sports games that operate on carefully designed fields with a strict rule book, all within 60 or 90-minute bounds, because all of those things are a tiny bit of order in a chaotic, perpetually dilating world. And when we finally realize who we are, what we think, and what we feel,
Ooh,
start to
we find any
exist in an
firework
entire
materials in here?
universe of our own, contained within a hollow sphere. The Earth's surface is not concave. Don't live inside a giant hollow ball. We tell ourselves that we're always in pursuit of infinite, that we need to explore other people, other places, other planets. But maybe we always need to feel like we live inside something. And as always, thanks for watching.
Throughout the 1800s, in saloons across the West, you could find cowboys locked in tense standoffs. But these weren't shootouts, they were simply playing cards for a mountain of chips worth their weight in gold. Most men wore loaded pistols, in case a player was caught cheating. When they prepared to make their bets, however, these cowboys weren't focused on their holsters or their cards, but rather
I am
on their
cutting edge of
opponent's
fashion.
face.
Next
Because not even a
customer, give
could
up.
protect them from a well-executed bluff.
You're
From
going
its
to
obvious incarnations, poker has always been a battle of nerves. The game first emerged around 1800 in the melting pot of New Orleans. At this time, two games ruled the card tables. French poker, played with a 20-card deck, and English brag, which used 52 cards. Both these games saw players being dealt 5 cards from a 4-suit deck, and then trying to make the best hand possible, according to a simple hierarchy.
Lend me a hand.
They would then wager on whether or not they had the best hand, either adding more money to the pot or folding and forfeiting their chance to win it. But since each player's cards were only revealed at the end of the hand, someone with bad cards could always bluff, betting enough to scare his opponents into folding. Both games had slightly different hand combinations, but most importantly, brag allowed players to discard and draw new cards. making better hands more likely and allowing for another round of betting. Eventually, the Southerners merged the two games into a new version of poke, which they pronounced polka, created bigger pots and opportunities for more complex bluffing. This winning combination of guile, guts, and gambling caught on quickly, but its popularity skyrocketed after the invention of the steamboat, which carried livestock, goods, and card games up the Mississippi, Ohio, and Missouri rivers. By Abraham Lincoln's election in 1860, Americans in every state and territory were playing the newfangled bluffing game. While many played for low, friendly stakes, some gamblers put their homes and livelihoods on the line. These life-changing bets even found their way into popular novels like Gone with the Wind, where Scarlett O'Hara's father wins an entire plantation in a single hand of poker. But as pots became bigger, so did the temptation to cheat. Some players enlisted an accomplice to spy on opponents and used props to communicate their hands. Others marked important cards with nicks, dents, or invisible ink. But perhaps the most common method was sneaking a cold deck into the game. Cold decks were pre-selected to give victims powerful hands that encouraged them to bet big, while giving the cheater an even better one. However, even cheaters had to keep up with the game's constant changes. As poker moved west with the gold rush, new variants emerged. Five-card stud became the game of choice among notorious gunmen like Doc Holliday, Wyatt Earp, and Wild Bill Hickok. With 4 rounds of betting, five-card stud produced even more lucrative pots, encouraging so much cheating that California outlawed the game in 1885. Meanwhile, back in Texas, another variant emerged to solve the common problem of having too many players and not enough cards. This game, known as Texas Hold'em, became a favorite because its low ratio of private hidden cards to shared exposed cards allowed for plenty of deductions and tactical maneuvering. Even more exciting was No Limit Hold'em, which allowed players to go all in, betting everything they had at any point in the hand. In 1928, Hungarian polymath John von Neumann sought to explain the nuances of betting and bluffing in mathematical terms. His work became the foundation for a whole branch of mathematics called game theory, which has grown to be vitally important not only in high-stakes poker, but in economics and military strategy. In the late 20th century, game theory became essential for navigating the geopolitical bluffing game of nuclear warfare. Today, America's card game is an international affair, attracting players from over 100 countries to the annual World Series of Poker. Fortunes are made and lost every day on casino floors, poker websites, and in thousands of live and online tournaments. So while a single game's outcome will never be certain, poker is definitely here to stay. Another game that's here to stay? Chess. Over the 1,500 years it has existed, chess has been known as a military strategy tool, a metaphor for human affairs, and a measure of genius. Find out more about its history with this video.